Welcome to a special weekend edition for Hashtag Trending and Cybersecurity Today. Our show today is about artificial intelligence, and on this special long weekend show, we're doing our own back to school edition. Well, it's not back to school, it's back to work. And this is based on the idea that, at least when I was in corporate life, there was a time when we were just finishing our budgets. Now it's usually August, September, and then we were starting up plans for the next year, as well as looking to wrap up projects before the end of the year. And we were trying to look at some of the initiatives we're going to do over the next year. And I thought, well, a lot of what's going into that planning right now is trying to figure out what you do about artificial intelligence. So today we have a special panel for our long weekend show. I've got Evgeny Koloda. He's a CIO and a consultant currently doing a lot in the medical arena with AI. Welcome, sir. I've got Marcel Gagne, and Marcel is well known to our audience now. He's a guest and a panelist on a number of our shows, and he's a man of many talents, but he's also our resident expert on open source, as well as you'll find out, he knows a little bit about AI as well. Welcome, Marcel. I got John Pinard, an old friend and VP Operations in Cybersecurity with a large credit union. Welcome, John.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Beauceron Security. Now, if that company name sounds familiar, it's because David Shipley, the head of Beauceron, is a frequent guest and panelist on Cybersecurity Today and sometimes on Hashtag Trending. And this time he sent us Nicole because her work, he tells me, is particularly focused on AI and cybersecurity. So you really are working in that.
I am actually working in that, but I most feel like I need to send my condolences out of me instead of David, but I'm so happy. Thanks for having me.
He's got to watch it. I've heard good things about you. David may be in competition for his panel spot now. And of course, we have me. I'm more active, I'm going to say, than a host might normally be in these discussions. For those of you who know me, I'm a former CIO. I was the head of global IT consulting with a large consulting firm. And I'm back to doing advisory work with clients, particularly on artificial intelligence and some cybersecurity. So I may jump in and act like I know something. But today, what I want to cover is a couple of things. There's the promise of AI, what's possible, not in the future, not when we get to artificial general intelligence, but in the coming months, and what's really there that we can work with. I hope, and I know we're going to get some use cases and examples from our panel. And we're definitely going to spend some real time on the challenges of AI, particularly cybersecurity related challenges, but others as well. And last but not least, we're going to talk about developing a strategy for AI going into the next few months and all the way into the next year. That's a large topic. Realistically, we're just going to get started on this discussion, but we will make some resources available to you with more detail on the topics. Full disclosure, some of those are sponsored by the consulting company I work with, but they're written by me. And of course, this is a topic that we'll continue to address in regular programming. One of the ideas I have, by the way, is to ask for your questions on AI and cybersecurity. And we're going to do what I hope is a special Q&A show on this. But for now, let's get started. The current state of AI. Now, I don't know, panel, if you're as amazed by this as I am, but it's hard to imagine that it's only been 2 years where OpenAI released its first large language model. That amazed me. I think it amazed a lot of people. Today, it sounds so primitive. We forget just how much has changed since the launch of generative AI. Prior to the launch, we had AI in our businesses, but it was primarily machine learning models. And these were large projects, and they're vast amounts of data needed and big budgets. And so a lot of the work was done in financial services, medical uses, big project things like that, where it was the purview of large companies and there were things that could be done commercially. If there was a large customer base, you could sell this at a sort of a retail basis, but for the most part, large companies.
Well, if I can just jump in and point out that as you're pointing out, November 30th, too, which is when ChatGPT was unleashed onto the world. But even before that, there was actually the GPT-2 model, which was made available, I think, like 3 years before from OpenAI. And in fact, I remember writing an article about it showing how you could actually install and run GPT-2 from your PC at that time. So it was actually possible to do it. The model would fit entirely on your PC. Now, what was interesting is that they actually said at the time that the next model they were working on was too dangerous to release. They actually called it that way. It was too dangerous to release into the world. And then, of course, November 30th, 2022, we get ChatGPT 3.0 version.
Yeah. And John, there was a lot of use in financial services, particularly the big banks, I think, where we were using AI, primarily, I think, for fraud detection.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of things out there. Anti-money laundering and fraud detection has always been a big issue. But even just analyzing data, I mean, they talk about data analytics and all the rest of these that they're now looking at, well, gee, how can we utilize AI to do this rather than spending these exorbitant fees on these other tools that we were previously using? So there's a lot of talk about the use of AI within the financial industry, but it also brings up other things like security and privacy that needs to be looked at as well.
Evgeny, the medical world was using machine learning. I think a lot of promise of that nearly before ChatGPT hit the rails.
And I think there is a leap from using the algorithms, right? In financial world, we all used the algorithms before, right? So we analyze data, but we use big machinery, a lot of time, very expensive analysts, right? And suddenly the generative AI gave us an opportunity to use it everywhere, right? I'm focusing on practical implementation of AI, and we see it everywhere: marketing, HR, finance, logistics, everywhere. Everyone can use it right now and just completely change how they operate. In healthcare, particularly, I'm working on a big project right now. We see the EMR where they infused AI, generative AI, in their product. And suddenly the doctor is spending 2 minutes on making the progress notes instead of 2 hours. And it's literally like the AI is listening to every single conversation, puts the notes in the proper fields, do the X-ray schedules, do the drugs schedules and orders, everything for the doctor. So it became a true virtual assistant. And I remember my time in investment banking, like we were building those virtual assistants, right? It was very big projects, but it was too difficult to build. With generative AI right now, it's available. And there are hundreds of platforms.
And Nicole, I mean, now nobody has a cybersecurity product that that isn't AI powered. Everybody's got slapped every label on that. But was AI being used in cybersecurity before about 2 years ago? I'm just thinking back.
Absolutely. I think what's funny is that we're all talking about AI and all this big revolution that's happened in the last 2 years. But AI in the cyber world actually dates back to the 80s. Thinking about things like firewalls and encryption technologies, there were basic forms of AI already being used then. I think that there was more of a boom really happening in the 2010s where they were leveraging AI systems to anomalies in the network and the systems. I'm also thinking about from the personal side in terms of password management, use of biometrics. I believe it was 2013 where we finally saw the fingerprint scanner getting added to iPhones. 2017 marked the facial recognition systems being added in, and those are huge innovations, I would say, in just being able to manage your own personal systems. So there's been a lot of innovation happening through the years, but there is something special going on now with all of these generative AI systems that we definitely need to pay attention to.
The generative AI component, which you just said there, is actually the big thing, because you're right. I mean, people have been using various AI systems forever. In fact, there's a terminology for it, good old-fashioned AI. And it basically, it's true, GOFAI, go look it up. It's an acronym in the AI field. Anyway, good old-fashioned AI was based on a variety of things like early machine learning, early experimentation with neural networks, which did not go anywhere because of the awesome computation that was required, which we didn't get until recently. There was also like expert systems. At one point, the idea was that we could model an artificially intelligent system based on giving it a whole bunch of rules of the way that human beings actually, it's like, well, cats are four-legged creatures, and go through this whole logic tree, which we could use for any expert field where we get into this whole expert system thing. And it was very narrowly focused. The reason this is so incredibly exciting today is because we have gone over a technological ledge here, which basically gives the machine the ability to talk to us and us to talk to the machine in normal human language, which is something we've never had before. Like AI systems, yes, they've existed before, but as we were building expert systems, we also needed experts to work with those expert systems, to work with those artificial intelligence technologies. And you don't now, like anybody can use the most complex and most up-to-date artificial intelligence. I do it all the time. I have these things in my refrigerator and I need something for supper. What can you suggest? Like, that's awesome stuff, but it has nothing to do with the complexity from a user perspective that used to be the norm, going back to the 80s or the 90s or the 2010s or whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to submit one more thing, and I think you've got it, Marcel, but I'm going to submit one more thing that I think that OpenAI or ChatGPT did, and that was its ability to create, and hence the word generative. One more time. From generative pre-trained models, its ability to create was a big thing. Because I know at the same time ChatGPT was coming out, Google had a model, and we actually did a show on it. It was conversational. It could talk to people. It just didn't have the same flow. But even at that time, there was some researcher at Google who was claiming that this might be a sentient form of computing. But that was largely later disputed, particularly after ChatGPT came out. But it really knocked us out when it could write a poem, when it could write a report. I think that's another piece that really got added with generative AI.
Can I just put two words on the table here? Sentience and sapience. Okay, because people tend to try to assign what artificial intelligence, whether it's thinking, whether it's sapient or something like that. First of all, we don't have a definition of consciousness that we can apply to everyone on the planet or every living thing that exists on the planet. But sentient means that you can take information through your senses and adapt in a way to respond in some other fashion. In that respect, an amoeba is sentient. And in that respect, most AI systems that you can think of, in fact, going back several years, are sentient. Sapient implies that you understand what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're saying, what the other person is saying, and so forth. So I'm always really bothered by this whole sentient thing because, yes, AI, artificial intelligence systems are sentient. They have been for a while. But are they sapient? Well, that's another matter entirely.
Good, yeah, good point. John, what was it that amazed you about ChatGPT when you saw it the first time?
I think it was the interactivity, I guess, that you can now talk to this thing. And it opens up a whole different area of potential. The potential to be able to use it for help desk systems or customer service, that it has the ability for you to ask it questions and it can go into its database and figure out what the answer is. And it can come back with a valid response, or at least hopefully a valid response. I can tell you, it's my go-to when I have to create job descriptions at work. Why sit there and try and figure things out when I can just say, ChatGPT, write a job description for this job title with some of these key items in it. And within 30 seconds, I've got a job description, at least as a starting point. It saves me hours of trying to write things the right way when it gives me the basics and I just go in and tweak it to fit for the individual organization.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because I think you've hit onto something that is really important in dealing with this, and that is everybody in the early days of this was looking for how to trip it up. A lot of other people, and myself included, were looking, and I think, Evgeny, I'll let you jump in on this one as well, but a lot of us were looking for what it could do. And we found a lot of great stuff that it could do. I think that was the amazing thing. If you were spending your time looking for the hype, will it try and steal my wife or will it try and threaten me? You could do all kinds of different things with it. You could cause it to hallucinate and all that stuff. I was more interested in things. The reason I jumped on this was I was posting for a job and the last thing in this world I want to do is write a job description.
Yep.
And there are a billion of them out there. I did the same thing, typed in a job description. And then I created, later when the GPTs were around, I actually created one to evaluate the job descriptions. And it was easy, so it was a good thing. Nicole, what amazed you about ChatGPT, and particularly talking about cybersecurity?
I think that the piece that has amazed me the most is just its ability to process huge pieces of information. We're almost, in a sense, moving beyond pattern recognition and into pattern creation, where we're now able to have this huge corpus of information. Here, let's just think about fraudulent emails, for example. We're able to pass X number of fraudulent emails into these systems, and it's able to identify different patterns in those emails to say whether something is fraudulent or not. And that's not necessarily something that we would even be able to see ourselves with the level of knowledge that we have. But somehow, with the context that it happens, with the way that we're structuring or malicious actors are structuring their sentences, able to pick up on these slight nuances that is just absolutely incredible.
I can maybe, Jim, to add to Nicole's statements, right? In cybersecurity, we have data analytics before, and we pay tons of money for log and SOC. So they analyze logs. Engineers are sitting and analyzing tons of logs, billions lines, right, every day, and trying to figure out what's wrong with the system. Now we have the intelligence of the system. I've been evaluating the new SOC AI-based applications right now weekly. Like weekly, I'm telling you, I've got hundreds of them. And they're all very simple. You collect all the logs and let the generative AI to analyze and find a pattern. Find the pattern. And before we analyze the pattern, we bring it to the engineer and he makes a decision. But now the generative AI went the next step, right? It has access to systems. So it brings up the high security logs and say, you need to act on this. And if engineer says, act on it, it actually does the action. Lock the system, lock down computer, change the password, and do the next step. So it becomes intelligent. And I think this is the next leap we had. We had the systems, we had data analytics, right? We used it before in our profession where we could talk to the computers on our technical level. But now it became intelligent to the point that it can make decisions and it can suggest. It became your business analyst, strategy analyst, who can help you to save a lot of time.
Because I think this is something that people seem to forget. Jim has heard me use the expression that hallucinations in large language models are a feature, not a bug. I believe that what people need to understand is that this thing should be there to help you. Like for you to sift through these thousands and thousands of lines of a log file or something like that, humans will hallucinate. You will make mistakes. You will miss something that was in there. Whereas the machine doesn't have the problems with attention that a human being does. It may make mistakes, but human beings are much more likely to make a mistake than the artificial intelligence will. And now the model is actually able to point you to specific relevant areas where you can either act on or not act on it. But what it's doing is it's assisting you. And I think that this is, rather than always focusing on the idea of, oh my God, this thing is going to take my job or this thing is going to take all our jobs. How can we use this thing to make our jobs easier? Because we still got the jobs, but now we've got an assistant that is sitting there with us all the time, helping us out. So the helping is the part that I think we need to spend a lot more time focusing on.
I would agree. And if I could jump in for a sec, that it's help you to me is exactly the thing. At the end of the day, we still own the responsibility, or we should. And so the tools can help us to get to the point of making that decision. But the fear of some people, and I'll admit that sometimes I've thought about it too, is that it could get to the point where we lose control. Because as Evgeny said, with these systems where it can lock down systems and so on, that if there's a mistake in there, or if it, depending on how it's developed, it can start locking out things that it shouldn't. So there still needs to be the ownership on the human side of the fence.
I think this is an important point, though, that in terms of evaluating AI, and we've said this, I talk about using it for augmenting ourselves, but We judge AI, and we've done this since it started, since ChatGPT hit and everybody started talking about big time. We judge AI by a different standard than we do humans. So I'll give you my example. A friend of mine phoned me one time and said, I was looking through the logs for our security and I saw this blank spot. If you're in cybersecurity, Nicole, you'll point this out, right? Is you see a blank spot in your logs, something bad has happened. My first reaction, though, was, you read the logs? I should have been shocked with what he found, because all of the tasks that we can't do or we don't have time to do, people hallucinate as well. Yeah. If you're stuck reading lines of code, if you're stuck reading all of these things, you're going to make mistakes too. But we never took that into account when we started to judge AI systems. And yes, they can make mistakes. No doubt about it.
We have a lot of cases where we're analyzing right now. We're comparing the mistakes that humans are making compared to the AI right now. And in healthcare, we see humans are making more mistakes, especially physicians are getting really tired, right? So they're stressed, they overwork. For them, it takes so long to go through the progress notes. He might forget what he has done with this patient, right? In a day. That's why he needs to close these notes now while he still remembers. And they do make mistakes. We have the back office people who are making mistakes, putting the document to the right patient. AI is making less mistakes, and we see it over and over. But I agree, the last person who's making a decision, that needs to be a human. And then we see in AMR, that's the guardrail they install. The last person who makes the decision, it needs to be a physician.
I think these things are all going to get better, and they already have. But at the end of the day, there's always the potential for error, that last human intervention before you push the button or pull the plug.
But first of all, computers are designing their own code now. This is happening. It's happening at the level of chip design, for instance. The days where a single person was out there etching individual lines of connections for a chip, that has long ago faded into the dustbin of history. And the artificial intelligence systems were not programmed by a single person. Artificial intelligence systems, modern systems like large-scale generative AI systems, program themselves, more or less. Things are set into motion. They're fed ridiculous amounts of data, and they are left to their own devices to decide where their attention has to be drawn in terms of the vast amounts of data that they're fed. So there isn't a single program or single algorithm that actually creates those things. And in that respect, modern AI systems learn more the way that human beings learn. Human beings don't sit there and go, okay, here is a fact. I have that fact. Let's move on. Here's another fact. I have that fact. Let's move on. We don't do that. We take in vast amounts of information, whether it's from our environment, from the conversations that we're having with people, the movies, the TV shows that we watch, the music that we listen to, all of those things. And they all get bundled up in there into our brains. And our brains do exactly what modern AI systems do. They direct our attention to things that we start to think are relevant. Why are they relevant? Because those patterns show up more often than other patterns do. Those are environmental things or factors that we think are either more important or more interesting or something like that. There are exceptions, of course, where something is so dramatic, even if it's a one-off event, it's so dramatic that we have to pay attention to that one thing. But the idea that there's somebody that programs these things specifically is something that we have to walk away from at this point.
But it's not programming, Marcel, I agree. But there is human intervention. And that was the big distinguishing fact in GPT, was there were human interventions. The scary part of those human interventions is they aren't coding. They're changing weightings. I don't even know all the things they're doing. And they don't know what they're doing and what the impact is. And I think anyone in that field will admit that. They don't really understand the implications in the same way we did with coding. It's a bigger, scarier world in terms of dealing with how you teach these things. I mean, in a recent example, ChatGPT got stupid all of a sudden. How did that happen? Nobody knows. Maybe they sort of figured something out because they made it a little smarter. But our impact on these models is not something we really understand.
Most of these systems will have APIs where you can go into the back end and program your own version of something. There are places where you can actually fiddle with those dials, with those sliders on the model. So you can change the randomness of it. You can change what's called the temperature of the various responses. And that gives you an idea of just exactly what companies who produce these things are working with. That's part of how they adjust, because the model itself, once it's been created, once it's been generated, is a thing that's sitting out there. How useful it is depends an awful lot of how those dials are set.
Nicole, how are you dealing with the fact that it's no longer programmed? How does that affect what you're doing?
I think that it can depend very much on the application, since I think in certain applications, you can be more okay with not having that level of understanding. If it's just coming up with a quick summary, but you know that they're going to be reviewing it and having more conversations on it, you might be more okay with the fact that you don't necessarily know how that decision was made, but explainability of these systems is still something that is very important. I would say that not every application is going to allow for us to use these models at this point in time. And then there's the fact of, like, for our systems, for how we're using it internally, but also just trying to make sure that the folks within the organizations are getting the correct information, not that they're then having the feeling of things are shifting a different type of way. We now no longer know how these decisions are being made. We need to make sure that there's that level of transparency through the whole organization.
No. So the explainability is definitely one of the issues, and that is if something happens, you can't track it. Evgeny, you were going to jump in and say something.
Yeah, it's hallucination. So we discussed it previously, right? Recently, again, GPT-4 just went really crazy. I had to switch to Claude because it's hallucinating to the point that I cannot use it. So we use the enterprise level version with Gemini, Claude, and OpenAI, right? And I always go back to engineers and I'm pointing those hallucination moments. And I go really deep and I try to convince AI that the AI is wrong. And the AI is trying to convince that he or she is right. We're going back to the point where I collect hundreds of lines of codes and I send it to engineers. I was like, show me how did it happen? And a lot of those responses come back that we don't know. It's something with GPT, OpenAI, LLM. We have no idea. We're tracing. They come back to me weeks later saying, we have no idea. We don't understand. It's a simple task.
So what you're saying, Evgeny, is that GPT is getting to be more human because humans refuse to admit when they're wrong too.
Absolutely. And they can prove you, right? And sometimes you say, maybe I'm wrong, right? So you start doubting yourself. I started doubting myself when I started using GPT, right? Because I think it's more intelligent than me. But a few months later, I started digging really deep, look at the reasoning, go line by line, trying to understand why it gave me this reason. And I think all those prompt engineers right now trying to understand why AI is doing what it does.
Well, a classic thing that you should try is just ask the AI how it got to that point.
Or just
don't try to correct it. Say, how did you arrive at this conclusion and show me? Because people make the same, again, John said something like, humans are always right. But the fact is, we don't always know how we came to a conclusion about things either. We have a hunch that this is the case and we go on the hunch. How did you arrive at this conclusion? I don't know, but I know it's right. And you'll double down on that until somebody actually shows you or forces you to go through your reasoning steps. And sometimes, that just doesn't happen.
The only time I've ever seen systems really come crashing down has been with code that couldn't possibly have an error in it. So, we're irrationally confident about things. But there's a good point in this, and that is one of the techniques that is being used. And this is one of the biggest weaknesses right now is that AI can't reason, and it still cannot. It's getting better. I think, Google's Gemini model won a competition for mathematics, doing new problems. These things are just being introduced now. But really great thing that was being used until this logic and reasoning comes up is chain of thought. And you said it well, Marcel. Ask this to break the problem down into units and go back over it. And I use that from very early times, and it increases accuracy a lot. And when you talk about the unknowns as well, I read somewhere in a forum that if you act emotionally to the AI, it's more accurate. So I'll trust the chain of thought one more than the superstition one, but it does work in terms of breaking the problem down and doing the same things to try and I think a lot of that has been built into the models now, which is probably why they've become more accurate.
Well, there are two things that I'd like to sort of throw in here. One of them is that today is not the future. Okay. Like people have this weird idea. They go, well, the model can't do this. So obviously this is never going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. And we have this weird idea that somehow because something is the way it is today, it will never be any different than what it is. And I'm not saying everybody makes this mistake, but it is a logical mistake for people to make. And of course, the answer is that's the way it is right now. The second thing that I just sort of want to get out there is that to find out where AI is going and to understand what it is that it's doing, you should try to use AI for everything in some way. And I know this sounds crazy, but ask it for things like recipes. Ask it whenever you have a weird question. Ask it when you've got some dilemma, some problem that you're trying to work through on your own, sort of like the way you talk to a psychologist. Jim sent me a script that he wanted me to do a little project on, and he took a screenshot of the text and sent it to me. And I looked at it and I thought, there's no way in hell I'm going to sit here and type all this out. So what I did was I took the screenshot that he sent me and I fed it into ChatGPT and I said, tell me what it says here and print it out for me. And then all of a sudden I had text that I could copy and paste into something else, as opposed to bugging Jim and saying, can you please send me the text? Constantly, if you bring it into your everyday life as part of things to do, including things like doing silly things like I want to create a picture, a monkey riding a horse on Mars. Like you start to get an understanding of what it is capable of doing. And you're also able to respond when things don't work the way that you think that they should work.
And you get better at using it too. You learn new ways to use it and new things that it can do for you.
The way that we're talking about these systems, it's almost like we're trying to parent the systems. Since we don't necessarily know how the systems are working, but we're trying to put up these guardrails and we're trying to figure out like, how can we best leverage it? It doesn't really know itself very well yet, but we're trying to have it be the best form possible. So it's like, we're forming this together. We're all in this together. And we're going to hope that it ends up being the best kid possible.
We just want our children to be the best AIs they can be.
Oh, absolutely. At least I think everybody's familiar with the concept of emergent systems. It's like a bee in and of itself doesn't look like it does much other than, move around from flower to flower, but you put them inside a hive and they create this amazing structure and they make honey. And then there's all these little dances and communications and things happening. That's an emergent behavior. Something comes out of it. Humanity's children, the AI are in some ways humanity's children, but they're also us as well. It's us expanding out into this other area. We're taking the way that we think, the way that we process information, and we're starting to put it inside all of these things, as opposed to just writing something that runs a little algorithm as a programmer. We're saying, how do we take everything that is amazing and fantastic about the way that human beings work, and we imbue that into the machines that we've got? And in that respect, Nicole is 100% right. We're figuring it out as we go along, partly because we're trying to understand ourselves when we build these things.
Yeah, I'm spending hours talking to AI, different platforms right now. I'm using the calendar assistant, which is building my calendars. So I'm taking a screenshot of my son's football calendar, send it there and say, extract information I need, put it on my calendar, invite my wife, right? And find the best time slot. And it does it, right? But it requires communicating, discussing, understanding, catch the hallucination, correct your perspective, your prompts, how you design it, right? We're building it. AI is very fluid right now. And the systems are popping up every day, hundreds of them. I'm evaluating a few dozen a week. But you find some of them are very easy to use. They communicate to each other. They understand other data sets from completely raw data sets, unstructured from different systems, which is amazing. We didn't have this before. Now systems can talk to each other. And we in the middle suggesting or guiding the AI to build that unified ecosystem in the future, where you will have that, human AI pin, you press the button and it does everything for you, right?
So what I'm hearing from all of you, and I think it's true, is you need to get out and experiment. You need to be trying the things. You need to be playing with these. So the question I would have, just even taking where we are and just saying the text-based models right now, how does somebody decide which one to use? We've got OpenAI, we've got Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, you've got Llama from Facebook and Meta, you've got Mistral, which is from France, and now we've got Grok from Elon Musk. And the only piece of advice I can give, never use Grok in front of your children. It has no
filter,
no guardrails at all.
I have access to Grok too. And by the way, I didn't do this to support Elon. I did this because I actually wanted to have access to Grok too. So I paid the $8 a month. But it does have guardrails. There are things that it will not do. There are things that it will push back against. So the idea that it is completely uncensored is actually false.
Okay. I mean, I saw a picture of Donald Trump kissing Kamala Harris. You couldn't do that on any other model. So how do people sort out these different models?
Right. Try all three, right? GPT, Gemini, and Claude, they have different features, different output, right? We always try three, okay? At least. And there are platforms which give you all three, okay? But you need to find a business case. Why do you need AI? And I actually go to AI and I ask, here's the business case. What should I use? GPT doesn't tell you, hey, I'm the best, use me. It actually can tell you, well, this, because it has so many characters you need to process, go to Claude or go to something else, Midjourney for imaging editing and so on. I actually present the business case to AI and I ask, what should I use? And for different business cases, it gives you a different outcome. I'm going through an AI mastery class right now with Mind Valley. And the good question is, everyone is asking, oh, I want to use it, but I have HIPAA, I have PHI data. And the answer is, there are only a few GPTs who can process HIPAA and PHI. And that's been a problem. I've been evaluating, talking, trying, because they're all out there, right? But they don't want to sign HIPAA compliance. And I found a few who did because they're using Google or Microsoft infrastructure and their LMS, right? But there are quite a...
I think that's the thing, is that there is no silver bullet. You're not going to find one tool that's going to do everything you need it to do. And, as Evgeny says, he's investigating these tools, multiple tools on a weekly basis. Every time I turn around and look, there's new tools that are, this tool has come out now and it'll do this and it'll do that. But I think you need to get to a point of saying, as Evgeny said, here's the business case. Here's the tool that works best for that business case. Your arsenal is going to expand based on the breadth of your business cases or what it is you're trying to do. I do like the idea, though. I will say, Evgeny, I hadn't really thought about asking GPT to tell me what tool would work best. So that's something new for me.
A fun thing to try, ask your favorite LLM to generate the best prompt to do something. It's like, well, I have to know exactly what to ask. Say, if you were asking an AI to do this particular thing, how would you ask it to get the best possible response? Just how much you can incorporate some of these things into it. By the way, Evgeny, you said try the 3 different models. There obviously are a hell of a lot more than just 3. But if I can throw a website out there for people to try out, there's a place called Open Router, OpenRouter. Why it's router, I have no idea whatsoever, given what it is. But Open Router is a way to try out a lot of these models, including use your API keys from Claude or from OpenAI and access the models side by side to be able to see what they do and how they work and so forth. And Open Router will let you plug into a ridiculous number of large language models that are out there right now. So it's a great way to check it out. And one other thing, if you want to try something on your own PC at home, just, that is not connected to the internet in some way, and you're willing to try some of the smaller models, There's one called Open Llama, and another one is just Jan.ai. Gives you a nice little graphical interface that you can run on your PC. As long as you've got a half decent graphics card, you should be able to run a lot of these smaller models on your PC and see just how they work, what they do without spending the big bucks.
Nicole, you were nodding there again. Did you have a comment?
Yes, I hear when we're talking about like we need to build the business case and see what model is going to be most effective for that business case. But there are companies who are in regulated industries, and they may not necessarily have the luxury of using what's best for them at that point in time, especially if you're just starting out by dipping your toe into this AI space. It may be seeing some of the less sexy details of like, where's my data being stored? What is already integrated into my stack? Can I do some type of experiment to show an internal business case that AI is going to make a meaningful difference to the organization? And maybe once I have built up that trust, at that point, we can have a conversation of what the best overall model or system is. But there may be some steps that are required for you to be able to have that conversation in the first place.
Are any of these models better for a regulated industry?
So I would say when we're thinking about ChatGPT and that partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft, being able to use ChatGPT within an organization, I think maybe a little bit less of a hurdle than some of the smaller, lesser well-known models.
Jim, for the HIPAA compliance, right? So we're using a platform called AIVIA.ai, AIVIA.ai, right? So it's a HIPAA compliant platform, but it has a very good, interesting assistance they train for law, for real estate, for CTO, right? So you can choose and say, hey, I'm the lawyer, corporate lawyer, right? And here's the prompt already trained, or that assistant is trained and encapsulate the data at the knowledge base, right? So it doesn't go outside of its guardrails, right? So it's very good trained assistant. So they made a very good effort to build those assistants for us. So you don't have to create new prompts.
I think he's talking about things like RAG, augmented generation, where you have the basic AI model, but the AI model is superseded or aided with your own personal data, whatever it happens to be. And I know that there are large companies like insurance companies, for instance, who will have made deals with companies like Anthropic that make Claude, and they'll have their own private model, which takes care of Nicole's concerns, where the data is not stored inside the general public database. It is a private instance that you run with your data and nobody else's.
Yeah, I do know that OpenAI, if you're using the API, does not use the data that you pass it for learning. So if you're using retrieval augmented generation, RAG, your own database, the problem you have, of course, is that you're going to pass at least some data to the AI system, and people worry about it using those for learning or learning from that data that you've passed it. I think these are questions you really have to ask or look at as you're evaluating a model. At that level, I think you will probably want to get some assistance from somebody to at least shake down those areas of concern.
And it also leads to education internally as well. I can give you an example that we had somebody that was going to use Copilot because we're a Microsoft shop, and it came up saying private in the corner. So they figured that they were safe, and they went to upload a PDF. Luckily, our systems blocked it, but we're not using a private tenant. So, people don't know the back end of these things, and it really becomes a corporate regulation type thing that you need to set rules and regs within the organizations as to what is and isn't permitted, and make sure that everybody is aware of them. To me, that's the biggest issue of utilizing AI.
And of course, making it private, running it internally, and that leads us to the open source versions. You've mentioned a couple of them, Marcel, and we will put a resource list out for people. I'm going to ask all of the panelists to send me the links that they've mentioned and anything else, and we will post a resource list. But there must be some good, at least decent open source models that people could be using privately in a company right now. I think you mentioned a couple of those.
Jim, you and I, we came from consulting background, right? Before we were helping companies to go through digital transformations to help them to choose platforms. Right now it's shifted to build AI strategy, help to choose the proper platform AI or LMM. And I think that's a lot of companies, even small and mid-sized companies, just reach out right now and say, hey, how do I implement AI? And yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't it sound a little bit like back in the early 90s, late 80s? It's like everybody's building a website. Can you help me to build a website? Like, I hear this is the next big thing, this whole internet stuff.
Right.
I thought,
Absolutely.
how can I incorporate that into my business? I'm always struck by this idea that we see every moment as though it's something different than every moment that's come before, but also that every moment that is yet to come is just the way that it is today. It's like the present is not past and the future is not the present. So we have to adapt. I came from a systems administration background that way back when, a gazillion years ago. And the thing I learned early on is that a good sysadmin was a lazy sysadmin. It was somebody who was willing to take a look at all the tools that were available to them and automate as much as possible. Because no matter what, you're always going to have more work than you could possibly ever do. And the only way to have any hope of staying on top of it was to create intelligence, if you will, to do some of that work for you. And really, this is just the next step in that evolution. It's very exciting. It's very cool. It's like nothing we've ever come across before, but it's just the next step.
So I want to take us past the text models, and just because I wanted to at least consider some of the things that have happened recently. And anybody who's watched Friday's show will have seen an AI version of me doing the show. We're at a cusp where we're also getting, people are calling it multi-modal, whatever you want to call it, where we're getting voice, we're getting visual representations, photorealistic representations of people and other things. And that is changing how we think about this. Does anybody want to jump in with some of the things how that's going to change AI in the near future?
I'll just mention the deepfakes, right? So from both perspectives, from the cybersecurity and on the other hand, training, right? They build a very good business case where I created my digital twin, right? With my voice, with much better English pronunciation. That's how my wife caught it, not me. But it speaks all the languages, right? Perfect Italian, perfect French, right? Any text you just upload on that pre-trained video, 2 minutes video, it does the video in seconds. So I brought it up to the marketing department saying, why are you training people, face to face? You're doing this through Zoom. Create those videos with the real person from your department. Just record 2 minutes video and it works perfectly. People don't even see the difference between who's there, the lip syncing, right? The different language, everything works. It became available only a few months ago, right? And it's constantly evolving. It's an awesome tool to do the training. On the other hand, deepfake is real. We do training right now. And a cybersecurity company reached out to me on the deepfake training, and they just created a digital twin of one of my C-level employee by showing me how easy it is. I was like, you cannot do that. This is violating privacy. And they say, well, but we want to show you how easy it is to call someone and show how to protect or train people.
Before we get Nicole's response, I want to ask you, Evgeny, because you sent me a deep fake of yourself. The voice on it was really darn good. And when I did try to do it myself, I got a much flatter representation of my voice.
I use the 11lab.io.
Yep.
11 Lab can manipulate, if you put more samples of your voice, it actually picks up an accent. They're changing that. It makes a really good voice digital twin. And then you can put it under the HeyGen, which does incredible stuff on the video.
Okay. So you used 11 Labs first. Correct. And then ported the voice over.
Yeah. HeyGen voice is not the best. The video is awesome, right? But you can implement the 11 Lab and say it's free voice cloning. And you can do it in seconds with 15 seconds of somebody's voice.
And your Spanish is great. Your Mandarin is fantastic as well. Yeah. Nicole, this must scare the heck out of a cyber researcher or cybersecurity researcher.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was going to try to not jump in right away, and we could talk about some of the positives first. So I think that there's a ton of positives when it comes to systems like this. But what I would say is that we already know that social engineering is more effective than any other hacking method. You're really going to be exploiting human error. You're going to be exploiting human trust. You're going to be leaning into someone's going to be uncomfortable, but they're not going to be saying something. And this just takes it really to the next level. So what is that going to do to our overall societal systems? How are we going to be able to figure out truth from fiction? And we've already seen the 2016 US election, how different nation state actors were able to have different influences on that. So I just see that there's going to have to be more education, more conversation on how to responsibly use these systems. And then really within organizations, coming up with their policies on how these things can be used responsibly. We need to be having conversations on how to appropriately evaluate the systems, but I think we also need to have conversations on how to appropriately build the systems in the first place. So how can we be consulting more when these systems are being built to say, what is it going to be able to do? What data are we injecting into the system so that it can learn these different types of pieces of information and really starting from ground zero? This is a huge topic. I don't see it going anywhere, but we need to make sure that we're staying up on it, talking about it, training on it, and seeing if there's different technological means that we can implement to overcome some of it.
Well, and just to add to that too, that from a financial institution, with my bank that I bank with, if you call in for support, you'll hear, oh yes, you've been voice verified. And so now you get into AI. Evgeny created a voice or a replica of his voice, or the good old Tom Cruise guitar singing, that if you start to use those types of things for financial institutions or healthcare or whatever, it says, oh yeah, you've been voice verified. Or get one step to deepfakes with, if you do video verified, it's frightening from a cybersecurity standpoint, where it's going to get to and how do you protect against it?
Nicole, what are the things we should be doing? We definitely do have photorealism. We have voices that sound a lot alike. What are the things that we should be doing to, at least in the interim, to protect ourselves?
I think that there still is some general education that needs to be done just so that people are aware of this technology. And ideally, they become a little bit more mindful of just the information that they're consuming. If something does seem off, because if I were to receive a call right now from David, our CEO at Bosteron, and you were saying, like, Nicole, transfer me $1,000, it's very urgent. And it sounded like him, but that's not something that David asks of me. So there's still that contextual information that I can gather, understand that something is off. Perhaps I give him a call on his phone since I have his number, and then we can chat things through and I can recognize, like, hey, this is actually not coming from David. This is a deep fake. This is some type of fraudulent attempt. So there's still that piece that I see a lot of value in us being able to educate, have that conversation. But there's a lot that can be done, I would say, on the technical side as well. I think that John had a really great point of evaluate your different systems, see what may be at risk with this new technology, and then have conversations to see if you can add in other layers of security to ensure that we're not unnecessarily opening ourselves up to risks.
And I would agree that I think education is key, but I will also agree that they don't listen to it.
You can train people, but you don't do it with videos. You don't do it with classes. You do it by getting your staff to get out and walk around and talk to them. And I literally have done this where we walk around and talk to people and just bring them up to date, talk to them, let them know that they can tell us if they're lost. And the perfect example is in my house, my home office. My wife knows nothing about computers. She wants to know nothing about them. She has a Mac. She wants to open her programs, see what she wants to see. She has no desire to have any discussion with me about anything technical. Got a text yesterday, said, Dad, I'm changing my phone number. And I looked at it and said, Linda, did you get anything from Andrew on changing his phone number? She said, you idiot. Like, what you were going to take that? You were going to respond to that? And I went, yes. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I honestly believe that if you get out and walk around, we've done it a number of times, and look people in the eye, because their eyes glaze over at videos. The meetings don't work. I think you've got to get out. Now, in bigger organizations, that may not work as well.
I'll give you a perfect example of that, because I do agree with you, Jim, that we can send emails out till we're blue in the face. Nobody reads them. But one of the things, and the idea of walking around to me is a good idea. I'll give you a perfect example with ransomware, right? You send out emails about, avoid ransomware and this and that and the other thing. And people go, oh, I'm not stupid enough to click on these things. And I actually worked at an organization once that we had somebody in accounts payable received an email that said, please pay the attached invoice immediately. They double clicked on it. They didn't notice it was a zip file. And as soon as they did, their system was infected, and it went through and encrypted everything on every drive that they had access to, including the network drives. And so sometimes actually explaining to people that don't click on ransomware because it's bad. I actually give that example so that people see just how easy it is to get fooled by it. And this is what I said earlier about click first, ask questions later, is that they need to turn that around and think before you click, right? Because it's that simple, and people don't realize just how simple it is.
I'll just step in quickly, because I know that we're talking about like the effectiveness of different training modules. And I feel like I need to weigh in here and just say that, like, based off of the data that we have been seeing, they do still make a difference. If they're necessarily the most effective, I think that there is still that culture of cybersecurity, of positive cybersecurity, that you need to build within your organization. So, Jim, I love what you're talking about with getting up, talking to people, making sure that they're aware of how to approach different situations. If you're having an all hands meeting, bring up the importance of cyber, and have like maybe incorporating something like that. This is our cyber tip. This is something that we're seeing a lot of. Let's talk about deepfakes so that people are more aware of what that is. And then that can also build that level of positive cybersecurity culture within the organization. And maybe even include a demo where they show the CEO and how easy it is to manipulate things, so that way, then John, just to your point of there needs to be that moment, think before you click. How can we build that more? How can we show the importance of that within the organization?
I think really is beneficial, right? Right from the CEO on down, that everybody needs to be cognizant of cybersecurity and the risks if you don't, right? Because having IT trying to bubble it up, nobody listens to IT, right? So, trying to get it to bubble up is much more difficult than have it flow down from the top.
We can call it tone from the top. We can call it an example, but I think the same is going to apply to AI.
Yes.
And I think we started this conversation with saying people need to play with it. They need to be able to do this. I had an argument with my CEO in the early days of Windows, and he said, you got to take solitaire off all the machines. And I said, why would I take free training off of all the machines? I said, I'm going to go around now, and you want me to pay people to go around and teach people to use a mouse? I put a game on their machine. They will learn to use the mouse for free. And he looked at me and said, oh, he didn't fire me that time, which is good. But I think the same thing has to apply to AI and to cybersecurity. Is we need to get people in the executive areas, and we need to make it fun. We need to make it acceptable to try things and fail. Evgeny, you look like you were going to say something on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the training is great. So with the deepfake, I immediately went to C-level, financial team, HR. I showed them how easy to make a deepfake. Their jaws dropped. They had no idea. So they immediately, any financial transaction, you need to face-to-face to meet the CFO, shake a hand to make sure he's real, create a safe words, right, in the meetings. So if you're discussing financial information, you say the safe words first.
Okay. This has been a fascinating conversation. I want to at least get a minute from each one of you to talk about what are the things people should be doing in terms of building a strategy? Let's talk about some of the things you can do to build a strategy for the coming year.
All right. So I guess I will start with that. So my final thing would be to say that to develop a playful attitude toward everything. Be like a child and look at all these things as though they're really cool, fun new toys that you want to spend a few minutes playing with before moving on to the next new toy. Once you realize just how many cool things are out there and how many things you can actually do, you'll start to gain an appreciation for what's possible and what you should also be wary of. So be playful, have fun. Don't treat this as something to be afraid of. Treat it as a game.
I truly believe that going into, I'll call it production with something like AI, you need to have a proper business case to be able to justify it and direct it. But along with Marcel's comments is you need to be able to play with it. You need to be able to learn. You get people that say, oh, we need to put in AI. I think people need to understand what the art of the possible is. And the only way they're going to know what the art of the possible is and what they could potentially do with AI is to be able to give them the opportunity to play with it. You need to be able to set up some kind of a sandbox that's safe, that they can do what they want with it and learn what they can potentially utilize it for to improve business.
Yes. The way I build a strategy, you cannot just go to C-level and say, hey, let's do the AI strategy for the entire organization. I did my MIT course for strategy, business strategy for AI. And the way I do it, I bring the business cases to different departments, right? So first I show them what's the capability of AI because they have no idea, right? So I show them what it can do. Then they come back and say, oh, yes, we have a business case for you based on what you have showed us. And here's the business case. Do the pilot, do the POC, run it, get the feedback, do the KPIs, do the what's the quality, quantitative analysis, right? How it's going to change company, right? Or how enhance some of the processes. Build the 5-6 cases on departments, then you go to C-level. Say, if we implement this, you're going to have the impact on the entire organization, or at least on those departments. And that will work if the C-level people are educated on AI and the capabilities.
What I would say in terms of an AI strategy is understand that AI, it's not something that's going to be going away somewhere. It's here to stay. Your employees are going to want to be using it, creating policies like you're not allowed to use AI. It's just generally unrealistic since people will be seeking out efficiencies. So how can you come up with a realistic AI policy where if you're scared to be using it, perhaps you can be running some experiments, seeing some of the value in it, and also having conversations like what we were talking about before on what actually matters for your different AI systems. There's a ton of different tools out there that pay attention to how the data is collected, how the data is being stored, ask questions around biases in the data, just so that you have an overall understanding of how the system can be used overall. And I would say in terms of the development of, if you're developing some in-house, engage with your engineering teams, have conversations around what type of data is being used. Do you have appropriate systems in place for those who are able to access the data, access the models? Talk about things like secure coding practices. Also make sure that you're implementing pen tests and so on, minimize vulnerabilities in systems.
And to that, I'll add my own advice. Start small, but get started and develop your strategy from that. I'm working again with companies, once again, to help them develop a meaningful and practical AI strategy. And that's been the idea that I've been putting across. Start small, build on measurable successes. The technology is new, but we can still use what we've learned in the past from things like lean, portfolio management, and other successful methods. And that's our show. Thanks to our panel, Marcel, Evgeny, John, and Nicole. Thanks to our sponsor, Performance Advantage. You can reach them at performanceadvantage.ca or the shorter version, padv.ai. That's padv.ai. And our resources will be made available on technewsday.com. And to our audience, thanks for spending the time with us. We love your questions and comments, so you can get those to me at editorial@technewsday.ca. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend.